Hello and welcome to Transforming Tomorrow from the Pentland Centre for Sustainability and Business. I'm Paul Turner.
And I'm Professor Jan Bevington.
How can we build more sustainably? Architects can make a huge difference to a building's carbon footprint, from the moment it's built to even centuries later. From a room with no windows, let's find out how. Jan, have you noticed anything unusual architecturally about this room? Where to start, thanks, Jan? Where to start?
Well, it's all baffled, so it's soundproofed. It's got no windows, which is not a great architectural feature.
It's got no windows. Now, you say it's not a great architectural feature, but for a podcast and recording studio, it's a perfect architectural feature. And you might think the architects have done a wonderful job of considering exactly what this room was going to be purposed for. Only when you consider that this only became a podcast studio about 4 months ago and that this building's at least 40 or 50 years old, do you begin to wonder where the window was and why there was no window in the first place.
Was there no window in the first place?
There was no window when we moved in here. No, when this got converted, they didn't have to fill in any window gaps. There was no window here.
I wonder whose office this was. Somebody who's very bad.
Yeah, there's something really odd about the architecture there. I'm assuming that the purpose it was used for beforehand, which... I'm really going out on a limb here and exaggerating. It's something to do with experimenting on babies. Was necessary for it not to have a window, and maybe they got it removed because you really want a window in a room. Yeah,
but I suppose what I would take from that, because I'm going to let the experimenting on babies pass me by and not engage with that thought at all. There's something called Baby Lab here at the university where they do experiments with babies, but not on them,
babies. And research with young children. Yes, okay. I just decided to change that into experiments on babies. Okay. As I said at the time, a massive exaggeration and a grossly offensive view of what they actually do.
Well, I'm pleased we've cleared that up. But I guess what's nice about it, and particularly coming into our conversation today, is that this room's been repurposed.
Yes.
Lots of places have been repurposed.
Yeah. But my old office is currently being repurposed, and the office I had before that is still being repurposed, so that I cannot go back to that office when the office I was in previously was needed to be repurposed as well. I just get moved around all over the place. But lots of repurposing going on for good reasons, because you can't just, and you'll remember this from our discussion with not so long ago Anna Cockburn about the fact that repurposing can have a good impact sustainability-wise as opposed to complete demolition and rebuilding.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So why are we rabbiting on about this, Paul?
Thank you for your description of this conversation as rabbiting on, Jan. It's good to know where I stand in your view of my discussion on architecture and observation of this room. We're rabbiting on about this because, Jan, today we're joined by Alfie Stephenson-Boyles, who's an architect with Donald Insall Associates, who specialise in conservation and heritage architecture.
Woohoo. We're in the right place then.
We really are in the right place. Maybe it was built by him. Maybe he designed this room. Did you design this room, Alfie?
I'm glad to say... no.
And now he's insulting our room. So welcome along to the podcast. I believe you have experience in both conservation projects as well as new builds. So you will have an idea when it comes to not just building anew and being sustainability wise there, but being wise about sustainability when it comes to renewing places too.
Yes. So at DIA, we're sort of specialists in historic buildings. So we work with buildings that are of cultural or historic significance, listed buildings, but we also work with any building, so we can apply the same methodologies to almost any structure, whether it's Edward I Castle in North Wales or a small little church. What we do is we look at the history of the building, we look at the condition of the building, and we're assessing sort of the capacity for change. To what extent can the building be adapted to suit the needs of its new custodians, its new owners, and our clients.
That'd be amazing. And what would be examples of maybe some of the iconic buildings that you've worked on that our listeners would recognise and know? But we have both UK-based but also overseas listeners as well.
Yeah, so Donald Insall Associates has been around for a long time, and our founder, Sir Donald Insall, founded the practice back in the 1950s, and since then has worked on probably some of the most famous buildings in the UK, such as Windsor Castle after the Great Fire in the 1990s, and the Westminster Palace, House of Parliament, and we're spread around the UK now. We've got sort of 7 offices, 7 studios. So I'm based in the Conway studio, which is in North Wales, and we work with buildings like Conway Castle, Carnarvon, town walls, medieval buildings dating back to the 13th century, and UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So when I started my first day at Donald Insall Associates, my director took me to a site in the town of Conway, and this is world famous medieval architecture, and said, "This is going to be your first project."
Oh, not daunting at all.
Yeah, not daunting at all. I was like, okay, how do we go about that then? And since then, that was about 3 years ago. I've been I'm privileged to work on some of the most important buildings in North Wales, sort of historically speaking, culturally speaking.
It's a bit different to working on this studio, I'll give you that.
Yeah,
I can understand why he was looking down his nose slightly at our studio when you consider the kind of buildings that the company works on generally. Although I'm sure, the Grand Hall of Windsor Palace has nothing on this.
We're not really, we're medieval in some ways, but not in that way, I think.
Yeah. Does Windsor Castle have a podcast studio?
Well, that's an open question, isn't it?
I don't think the Royals have quite gone down that route yet, but, maybe in the next few years.
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
So what do architects do in practice? Because we know you guys are out there, but I guess we're slightly hazy about what does that mean?
Yeah, so architects can take on a variety of roles in the built environment, but primarily we're focused around delivering buildings, and that can mean taking a client's brief, challenging the brief, and developing the brief, taking them through a process of concept design, so testing the brief against ideas that emerge from both the client brief and our own experience as architects, and testing those against also regulatory backgrounds. So we have to have quite a broad base of knowledge, and from artistic kind of references through the work we do to sort of regulatory and financial aspects. So we have quite a broad role. We're sort of a jack of all trades in a way. Once we've sort of developed a concept design with clients, we typically take them through the consents process, listed building consent, planning permission, and then developing contractual documents, construction drawings, everything that you need to basically build something, the instructions to the builder. How do you build this? And specifying materials, and organising space. Once we've gone through that process, we then manage things in terms of site contracts, site inspections. So it's really a job that has many facets to it, I suppose. It's a job that's at times extremely challenging in its breadth, but also that keeps it interesting. And you can kind of, as somebody coming into architecture, you can kind of find something that suits your particular skill set.
And there were 2 aspects of your description that really sort of hit home to me. The first one is that those early decisions dictate later outcomes, and so if you like, you're at the start of the design process whereby things can be good, bad, or better or worse or whatever. But then the other thing is that actually the holistic nature of that means that actually all of these elements come together and they're not sort of outsourced. So like the energy system's not outsourced from materials that are going to be used. So, and I quite like the idea that some of the things you'll be doing, and we're thinking back to description of Windsor Castle, are actually long term. So you stay with something and see it all the way through to the end. So it must be a labour of love to a certain extent to see how these things come together.
Yeah. I mean, certainly some of our more experienced colleagues have been with buildings and getting to know buildings for a very long time. And they talk about buildings that they look after as if it's some kind of child that they're kind of tending to, or
Yeah, no, I like that metaphor.
Not experimenting on them, but maybe experimenting.
How did this enter this podcast?
There'll be a whole new episode coming up soon about experimenting on children, I think. All of us apologising for suggesting such. Yes, yeah, there seems to be a lot more to architecture than just sitting down with a bunch of crayons and drawing a nice picture of a building, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
well, I'm pleased that we went to Alfie before we went to you on that one.
That's all it is. He's just making it sound good.
That sounds wonderful.
As soon as he leaves this studio, which he'll be glad to do by all accounts, he's getting out his Crayolas and just saying, "Oh, I could redesign that." And he gets, a few red bits here, green bits there, drawing a stick person in the corner, sat on a chair. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not wrong. I find myself often being a colouring in specialist, as well as maybe a sustainability specialist in architecture or a heritage specialist. And sometimes I'll be at work and I'll be thinking, well, I'm being paid to colour in. This is great.
That's so bad.
And you laughed at me when I suggested that's exactly what he does.
I take it all back. I take it all back.
Indeed. Let's talk more about that then, not the colouring in, but the sustainability side. And how does sustainability tie into architecture? How are the kind of decisions that you're making as an architect or that you're enabling through the decisions you're making affecting, helping, hindering sustainability?
To begin with, when we think about architects in the built environment, when we think about buildings, in the UK context, 40% of emissions, carbon emissions, are from the built environment. About 75% of those are from operational uses, and then 25% is the upfront carbon, or what we sometimes refer to as embodied carbon, the carbon that we emit from construction. So when we're designing, when we're working, it has a huge impact on emissions and people's well-being and health also. We're actually mega contributors to some of the problems that we have, which is something I've had to kind of come to terms with over my career in terms of how do I see myself as an architect working in an industry that is potentially doing harm. So a bit like medicine, we try and do no harm.
This goes back to treating the buildings like babies again, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Doctor attitude towards
Yes,
it, do
indeed.
no harm.
That's it. So how do the decisions that we make as architects impact sustainability? Well, it really comes down to what you were saying about those early stages. They're key. Sustainability lives and dies in the early stages. And sustainability is often sort of seen as a kind of bolt-on or something which is added to the project. But for it to be successful, it has to be intrinsic to the building's entire system, entire envelope, its entire form. Everything has to be developed through this prism of sustainability. If it's seen as a bolt-on, for example, it will be the first thing that's to be cut as soon as the costs come in.
Do you ever get customers just saying, "Oh, can you just throw a bit of a sustainability bit in there, just for the sake of it"?
Just as a little bit of a kind of a sticking plaster, you mean? Or sort of kind of
almost like they got to the end of the process and think, yeah, we should probably have something to do with sustainability
dusting,
in there.
little sort of shimmer of sustainability. Well, usually that kind of happens about stage 4, when the building's been designed, and then they go, it's actually going to be real. What's it going to be like? How is it going to perform? What are the emissions going to be? How comfortable are we going to be? We're going to be boiling hot in the summer or freezing in the winter. So that's when sometimes we come to things a little bit late. By that point, a lot of the decisions that are about reducing the building's impact or improving the building's performance have already been made. Things like the building's orientation, the form, down to things like the position of the windows. We've not got any windows right now. But I'm sure if we did have windows, they'd be having an impact on our comfort and therefore the energy that we're using to maintain that comfort. And if I'll just talk about oil age architecture a little bit. So there's this term that's going around, I think attributed to Barnabas Calder at Liverpool University. The idea that we have for the past 100 years or so been living in an oil age of architecture. So buildings designed and operated during a time of cheap energy. It's the idea that we can actually design a building that's of any particular shape, style, appearance, anywhere in the world, and you can make it comfortable by burning stuff. Burning oil. You can burn oil to keep it cool, you can burn oil to keep it warm, or you can burn gas. You can just burn stuff, it's cheap, and you can stay comfortable and stay as well as you can be in a kind of in that type of building.
I think we should just stop there. I can't see any downside to this at all. No, that seems fine.
Well, I suppose it's the norm.
That's the problem, isn't it? No, people didn't see downside.
Yeah.
So I'll let you continue, Alfie.
No, so when we're thinking about sustainability today, what we're really thinking about is decarbonisation. That's the kind of number one topic for sustainability in the built environment. And there's a whole load of sustainability stuff that also needs to go on, like biodiversity, water use. But I think certainly in the kind of reuse sector and heritage sector and retrofit, what we're talking about is operational decarbonisation. So removing carbon-intensive heating and energy sources, replacing them with low-carbon alternatives, heat pumps, I'm sure you'll have come across, but also reducing that energy demand. So how much energy is required to keep the building at a temperature that is habitable.
My partner works in a castle. She works in Lancaster Castle, and one of the things she frequently moans about is the temperature in there, because she's in a castle that was at some point converted into a jail, and her office is essentially a jail cell. There's comments here, I'm sure, about whether my partner deserves to be in a jail cell or not, but I'll move on from them. But the fact of the matter is, it was a castle and there was no heating system built into it in the 13th, 14th, 15th century. I should really know when Lancaster Castle was built, but my knowledge of that is sadly lacking, especially on the wing that she's currently in. But there was no, let's just put the gas lines in and have that heating it up. And as a result, they now have a heating system in there which is totally not fit for purpose, which makes me wonder. You've mentioned you've worked on things such as castles in the past. It was from Edward the first castle, so we're talking here, 800 years almost, 700-800 years. Is there an option there to do retrofitting of some kind of carbon-friendly heating system? Yes,
so what would be working in a castle would potentially also be working in a house. So what we'd potentially be looking at is a heat pump, either an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump. And if you can fit this castle with large heat emitters, large radiators or underfloor heating, then you're probably in quite a good place to warm that building just with the heat from the surrounding air. Is it harder, say, if you've got, say, conservation protection orders on? Because I'm sure some of the buildings you'll have worked on, the company will have worked on, will have restrictions on what can and can't be built into structures. Yes. You can do anything that you can justify. Which sounds...
This sounds like going back to the oil economy, doesn't it? Yeah.
Bad. But when you consider that these buildings need to adapt to survive, essentially, if you can justify that the harm being caused by said heat pump is outweighed by the cultural benefit, the communal benefit of keeping these buildings in use, and making sure that they're not falling into disrepair or becoming redundant because nobody can afford to heat them or can be comfortable in them, then you have a pretty good case to make some changes. We just finished a project in Carnarvon, actually converting one of these Edward I gatehouses actually into apartments. Unfortunately, it was designed a while ago, so it's on gas. But I think if we'd done it now, it would definitely on a heat pump. And we have introduced some sustainability sort of retrofit measures, insulation, secondary glazing, and an important thing, which is mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, which is huge.
So that sort of leads me to try to tempt you into the area of telling us about passive houses and how they work. I live in more or less a passive house. So we had...
I've seen you and your husband. There they are. Yeah, I don't think he gets any passiveness from you. That's for sure.
No comment. So this was a little. What do you call it when the two houses are beside each other?
Semi-detached.
Yeah, semi-detached. I can never remember the terms for these things.
You see, when it comes to architecture, that's my level, Jan. I can tell you what a semi-detached house is.
You're ahead of me now. Yeah. So it's a semi-detached building, and there was a very old lady who had lived there and then sadly passed away. And so it hadn't been touched since the 1970s. I hate to think what her gas bill was. I mean, absolutely hate to think. And so we got some architects, we got some builders. So basically went down to the walls and then rebuilt we paid the money for rebuilding the whole thing from scratch. So we have a mechanical heat ventilation recovery system. We have an air source heat pump in the backyard that comes through and a sun amp. And we don't have solar panels yet, but I'm saving, and I've got the kit will take solar energy into it. And we've just been amazed by the air quality and internal air quality of the place, and really, really enjoying that. So we didn't go down the route of this must be absolutely a passive house, but it probably is. It'll be somewhere on the spectrum towards a passive house. But before we get in, let's find out what a passive house is, which is not for you and I to answer, Paul. It's for Alfie to answer.
You seem to know. You just go away, Jen. You take it on.
Well, if
you'd rather our guest, who's meant to be the expert on these things, takes it away instead, we can do that.
Yeah. I think it's an Alfie question. So tell us about that concept and how that's enacted.
So Passive House came about in the 1990s and was sort of the invention of a German physicist called Wolfgang Feist. And what Wolfgang observed was that we were putting more and more insulation into buildings, and we weren't actually getting much of a return on that. The buildings weren't actually performing any better. So he came up with a system that prioritized air tightness, insulation, high quality workmanship, and energy modelling and quality assurance to make sure that what we were designing was actually getting built, and what we were designing was actually working the hardest to ensure that the energy demand, what we were talking about before with heating, is reduced to nearly zero. So it's a process, it's a standard, and it's a kind of methodology. It's a science-based, peer-reviewed mega standard. It's the gold standard, I'd say, for buildings, building performance. And it's concerned with energy. It sees energy as the sort of main apex predator of building design. It's kind of like the wolves in Yosemite National Park. You kind of introduce them and they take care of everything else. So
I'm worried these buildings are going to eat people. Don't go into the passive house. It's not as passive as it might sound. You lose a leg.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it an active house because it's kind of doing the bit that you might normally do, opening windows and going around the house lighting fires. It's doing that for you. You're the one that's kind of passive because you're just sitting there enjoying the 20-degree comfort year in, year out. There's some great examples of, I think it was in Canada or something, a passive house was caught in a snowstorm and the heating broke and it was minus 20 or something outside, and they didn't realise for 7 days that the heating had broken.
Heavens, that's a testament, isn't it?
I wonder, given the fact that there's so many different climates in the world and houses are built differently in different places to work on those climate, is a passive house in the UK totally different from a passive house in Canada, from one in South Africa, from one in India?
That's absolutely true. So it's a global standard applying climate models from wherever the building is being designed to the building design. So when you're doing the thermal modelling, for example, you're using a climate model from that locality. This is climate data. So if you design the same building and load a different climate model, you'll have vastly different results in your energy demand and the overheating analysis and all this kind of thing. So it's a global standard for local specificity, I suppose. It's entirely about orienting the building so that you're taking advantage of the sun, but not so much that you overheat.
Yeah.
They're often confused, actually, with solar passive, which you might have come across in the 1970s, an idea that you could heat a building purely with the energy of the sun.
Yeah.
It kind of doesn't work. You get buildings which are very hot in the summer and buildings are very cold in the winter. It's often said that windows are actually a very expensive way to heat your building. You might spend tens of thousands on windows, whereas you might just spend a few thousand on a heat pump and your annual heating bills if you design it right. So it's often confused with solar passive. It's not to be confused with solar passive. It's a different thing, and it's not only to do with houses, even though it's called passive house. It's just the German for building. the last thing is there's lots of sort of myths around passive house. We're in this room at the moment with no windows. There's a myth about passive house that you can't open any windows. People always say, we don't want to have passive house because we want to be able to open the windows. Don't worry.
You can.
You can just do it. you can just do it. Just open them.
There's no alarm that goes off and the police don't come round and say, what are you doing?
In fact, you're encouraged to do it, especially at night.
Yeah. And so that sort of contrasts with things that have been in the news recently where houses have been retrofitted with good intentions for warmth, but then have ended up being really quite ghastly places to live in. And why would that come around, that particular issue? And we'll put a link to that in the show notes so people can see that issue that's come up in the UK newspapers.
This is what we might call a national disgrace. This is government money being used to retrofit, to insulate our housing stock. Fantastic. How do we go about that? Well, do we get specialists in who understand buildings, who understand moisture, who understand detailing? No, we just apply sort of blanket methodologies to all the buildings. We apply the wrong materials and dodgy detailing to all these buildings. So 98% of these houses that have been retrofitted, I think, under the eco scheme have been requiring remedial action. They've been mouldy, overheating. It's a disaster. So what you need to do when you install insulation is you need to make sure that you're taking care of the rain and the water. You're not leaving lots of areas where you're creating what we call thermal bridges. So you'll see them going around the gas main because it's complex. You can't get the gas people in to change and move it. They just want to get in there, do the job and get out. So you'd have all these thermal bridges where you can have mould forming, where condensation's forming. And you have areas where the water can fall behind the insulation. So it's a nightmare. And it could have been something that could have been such a good opportunity to build valuable skills and valuable jobs and really skilled jobs around how do we go about this? We're going to have to do it. So how do we do it well? And it's really just been a PR disaster for retrofit, and it's affected thousands of people's lives.
Yeah, and that, I mean, the human cost is enormous, but for retrofit to then get a reputation for being a bad thing seems to me to a further worse outcome again in the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I want to know then, Alfie, where your interest in sustainability comes from. I hope it's not from just randomly bumping into Jan on a train, which I'm told is how you met, and it turns out, as I've discussed before, Jan knows everyone, and it turns out that Jan knows your granddad. So let's just assume that bumping into Jan wasn't the spark that lit your sustainability fire. Where does your interest come from?
I think I came into architecture always with a sense of wanting to do some kind of social good in the world. And that was, I'd say, challenged by my early years working in London, working for kind of large property or small property developers, doing sort of small London standard housing, cramming stuff in. I kind of got a different sense of what architecture could be about. But I learned a hell of a lot. But I was always motivated by the social justice aspects of architecture and also the quality aspects of design. And sustainability was always something that I had a kind of passing interest in, but I always felt as though wasn't really something that was part of my skill set. So I knew there was a problem, but I didn't really know what to do about it. When I joined Donald Insall Associates, I became part of the sustainability group, and that was about the company sustainability, but also about trying to improve our project sustainability. And through that group, I got the opportunity to study the Passive House Designer course. And that moment, doing that course and getting that certification, was when sustainability became, for me, one of the main drivers in what I do. So it was like a moment of realization that design quality equals sustainability, and sustainability equals design quality. Sometimes as architects we can get all excited about the way something looks, the way something affects our emotional response, the way we relate to space, light, colour, form, etc. We get excited about that, and then we sort of, as I say before, we leave sustainability for someone else to bolt it on, to take care of the mechanical, electrical design, heating design. What I learnt on the Passive House course enabled me to start shaping design and shaping those poetic aspects around a scientific methodology. So integrating sustainability in the design quality, and realising that our experience of space, of buildings, of comfort, is due not only to the visual aspects of what surrounds us, but the material, physical aspects of what surrounds us, the building physics, in effect. So that gave me a toolkit. And suddenly I was thinking, well, sustainability is a word. It's a word that we use a lot. It gets bandied around. It means different things to different people. And it often comes with a little hint of greenwashing in a lot of senses. So to actually think about what that means specifically in architecture and design, and have a toolkit that I can use to measure and progress those ideas, that was powerful. That was the turning point. Doing that course, becoming this passive house designer, I will wax lyrical and bore everyone to death about it ever since. So,
is that what happened on the train? Was this the whole conversation?
No,
you just sat down in a completely separate carriage, and then the man looked at you and thought, walk up. Would you like to know about passive houses?
What was your slides? Because we
on
were
a train.
Yeah, we were on a train. It was a slideshow. We were on a train south. It had got stopped.
Yeah, there was a bit of
bit of waiting to
Yeah.
see, looking at our watch, the will we make the meetings and that sort. And because I'm a bit of a nosy poke, I saw that Alfie was working on a presentation about Passive House, and I thought, I know a little bit about that. We'll have a bit of a chat. And I was working on a different kind of presentation, so I but partly I'm trying to learn to be more sociable in public spaces, especially when you're stuck. And sort of say, that looks interesting. Tell me about that. So yeah, it's the Passive House that made this podcast possible.
Well, there you go. It's had an added effect that I'm sure was definitely not part of the original plan for the Passive House.
Well, we can thank Network Rail for that one, I think. But then your granddad, we can't leave your granddad out of us. So
No.
the most wonderful Tim Lang, who I worked with on the Sustainable Development Commission, who's a professor of food policy and sustainability, he must have been so made up for you when you found the thing that you could link with your life in terms of skills as well as that sustainability agenda, because we're all looking for that sweet spot.
He's been there all the way. Yeah, and he's been a huge influence to me before I even studied architecture. In fact, before I went to study architecture, I said to him, I want to be an architect. And he was so supportive of me and said, you're not going to be Richard Rogers, you know. And I said, who's that? He said, exactly. So other than that, he's been incredibly supportive. Definitely growing up around the work that he does in sustainability and food has had an influence on, I guess, my direction in architecture.
Yeah. That's nice. It's nice to keep it in the family and push it on to the next layer.
So have you got some examples then of how you've built sustainability into the projects you've done? You talked about, your passion for both of the architecture and sustainability. What examples have you got that you specifically have done and worked on where you've built that in there?
So building sustainability into buildings. Really all starts with communication and conversation. Sustainability is, as I say, it's a word that means different things to different people. And some clients will, as soon as you say sustainability, just think, money, cost. No. Other clients may think about it differently. They may think, yes, it's a great opportunity to do something better in the world and to reduce our carbon footprint. In embedding sustainability, it's always about finding the the in with your client. It's always about understanding what motivates that client, what is their priority in this project. So when talking with clients, we don't even necessarily need to use the word sustainability. What do we talk about? We talk about what are your main pressures as an organisation? Are they operating costs, for example? What's your understanding of comfort, and what kind of spaces do you feel comfortable in? You're generally just looking for any in to say, we've got a way to solve this that will work for you long term, and that could be about operating costs, reducing energy costs, which is a big driver for, say, like councils, local authorities, institutions, universities. But some clients, wealthy clients, do they care about running costs? Not always. Do they care about comfort? Yes. Is comfort a way of saving energy? Actually, yes, if you go down the passive house method. We had one client who's had this really amazing opportunity to create a new civic building, an adaptive reuse of an existing civic building, an extension. And from the outset, when I was involved in this project, the client said, sustainability is not a driver for this project, which I thought, that's insane. This is the one opportunity you're going to get as a council to embed sustainability in this community. And sustainability can take many forms. It might be about, and Tim Lang would say, it'd be about the food that those people are eating in that building. It might be about the energy use intensity of that building. And sustainability was not on the agenda at all. It was seen as an extra cost, and this was a project for which capital cost was king. And then we introduced some consultant friends of ours, Ecospheric, who are based in Lynn, and they did some energy modelling, carbon modelling of the proposals and optioneering. So they looked at all these different ways in which the building's being used, all the different retrofit measures that we can implement, and they brought out of that the data around the operating costs of this design of this building. When the client saw those figures, that was the moment the penny dropped that sustainability was actually a driver for the project. The numbers told a better story than we could have.
And that's an example where sustainability didn't lead in that relationship. But are there, how much demand would you say is there in the system where people come and say, I'm doing something in the built environment context, either retrofit or a new one, and sustainability is at the core of their spec to you? Is that common?
It's common and growing, I'd say. I think more and more bids that we're submitting for projects, it's becoming more and more part of the bid process. The reality on the ground is when you're building these things is there's a skills gap. We can design to the standards that are required to achieve sustainability, but whether we can get things built is a challenge. It goes back to what I was saying about the retrofit eco scheme. The skills that were being used weren't skills that we would really want to be used in this regard in retrofit. So there's things moving at pace and other things moving at another pace, a slower pace. And the built environment is known for being a very slow mover. But in terms of client expectations and client demand for sustainability, I'd say over the last 5-6 years, from my perspective, it's increased dramatically from just being something that's seen as a hindrance and something you've got to do to pass building regs or whatever, to being actually an essential component and something that you can use to apply for grant funding, as was the case with this local authority client. They got some money due to the work that we did. I'd say it's growing.
So you've seen that growth then. What about looking to the future? What do you think is the next steps, the next frontier for sustainability when it comes to architecture?
Stop building things.
I thought you were just saying stop, right? No, the podcast's over. We're going home.
Yeah, that was a bad question.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so
We need to build less. We need to use less stuff. I think we've already used our carbon
the budget.
Yeah. Will Arnold, who's a structural engineer, has this amazing diagram which has at the top of it, build nothing. The number one priority as architects for us should be understanding what skills can we apply to something that actually don't result in a building, but they result for a beneficial outcome for the client without building anything. So in heritage and conservation, we're already kind of doing that. The building's already there. Usually we're not doing too much to it. We might be repairing it and reusing it, but we're not necessarily creating a huge carbon burp from emitting tons of CO2 from these vast acreages of concrete. So the frontier, as far as I'm concerned, is to understand how we can reduce the amount of work we do, building new work, but while still hopefully being in a job. And heritage is a fascinating one because for a long time it's been seen as the last priority in terms of decarbonisation. We can go for low-hanging fruit, we can retrofit buildings that are not as significant, but heritage for me is where the innovation is, and where it's such a constrained environment that we can actually, although it makes up a small amount of our built environment, it's actually potentially quite influential. So we're applying the Passive House methodology at DIA in some of our projects, using the modelling within a heritage context. So this standard, which is seen as this sort of like new build German Swiss thing, which also is a retrofit standard, we're applying it to heritage projects and not necessarily meeting the standard, but ensuring that we adopt the methodology, the principles in terms of quality assurance. There's other standards. Association for Environment Conscious Building have their own standard, which is being adopted by various local authorities as well as by individuals and corporations to improve their buildings. So they have a retrofit standard, carbon light. It's like a halfway house to Passive House. It's got a lot of the benefits in terms of quality assurance and reducing the energy demand and improving comfort, but you're not getting so far.
Thank you very much for joining us, Alfie. That's been a really good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm really worried, Jan, that the person who designed this room in the way that it is going to listen to this podcast and notice that we've mentioned approximately 512 times that there are no windows.
But for its functionality, it's perfect. There's no windows. And I suppose, there were so many delightful things that Alfie talked about, but one of those things was sort of like almost, a fetish for glass and windows. And actually maybe that's not functionally smart, and that certainly came through in some of the things that he described to us.
Yeah, certainly putting more windows on buildings in Lancaster isn't going to help you get more sunshine in. There's a whole bigger problem with the weather and the climate around here as to why you're not getting heat from the sunshine. It doesn't matter how many windows you might.
Indeed. But there was a lot of going on in there. There were lots of fantastic sort of phrases. Eco-bling, I liked that. Sort of slap it on and make it shiny kind of thing, as well as oil age architecture. I mean, that's really...
No, but it makes total sense, doesn't it? From the moment it became possible to just burn something and make something else happen, then that's it. From like the 19th century, mid-19th, late 19th century onwards, it's just, you want to do that? Yeah, we can do that. We'll just burn down this entire forest or whatever, we'll just build another oil well and extract all the oil and gas from it. But no, certainly what you're saying there about the bling, the built in rather than bolt on, and that was kind of a key thing. And it's something we've heard in other contexts as well. We've heard it in regard to the curriculum and teaching, how if you want to have sustainability as part of a teaching curriculum, you can't just bolt it on and throw in a quick sustainability module. You'll need to have sustainability threaded through it all. We've heard it in regard to businesses and how they plan and act. I'm sure you've heard it with regard to accounting as well. It's so many ways that you can see architecture fits in with the bigger picture that we've covered across the last 2 and a bit years on the podcast.
I was already feeling proud, but I felt more proud about the use of heat pump technology in the university, which we discussed with Anna a few episodes ago, in terms of using that as a way of creating the heating load we need for this institution.
Yes, and seeing, obviously you're proud of your own house. You're talking about, you obviously, you could see your eyes light up and say, this is what I've done with my house. Hey, I'm, you're a trendsetter, a sustainability mover and shaker.
Well, we had the chance to do it, and it would just seem crazy not to have done it.
And not everyone does have that chance, which is where you come to things such as the nationwide project for insulation that Alfie talked about, and how if you are going to do things like this, it needs to be properly planned and thought out. You can't just hire a load of people just to throw insulation in without considering the individual qualities of buildings and such, and the problems that this is going to lead to. What was it, 98% of all the buildings that have been involved in this project, which should have had nothing but positive effects, are needing retroactive action.
No, that's really horrible. And then the final thing I really liked is sort of like, Alfie was quite poetic but also scientific. And so that's sometimes seen as being a natural divide, but in architecture it clearly comes together, fuses together and creates that really beautiful outcomes.
And you missed an opportunity today, Jan. I was amazed. I was waiting for you to jump in with this opportunity when talking about the passive house movement and how it was a global movement that was adapted locally. There was a word you could have used there, which you didn't use. And I honestly felt there's never been a better moment for you to have used said word, but you didn't. I'd like to thank you for your restraint.
Well, I did fear. Yes,
you did
I
fear.
did.
Did you fear for something about babies being sacrificed?
I feared the repercussions.
Yes.
So after our foray into the built environment, what's next?
Old people.
Old people.
Yes.
I suppose old buildings, old people, there's a rationale.
Yes. Having offended babies earlier on, I'll now go out and, I don't know if you can offend a baby, they're too young to understand. I'll now go out and offend the elders of the community. We're going to be talking about issues regarding elderly communities and how that ties in with sustainability, looking after people, care of them, all these kind of things as well. And we've got Keisha Kaina, who is a professor in the Department of Economics at the Universitas Gadjah Mada in Indonesia, who's one of our partner institutions and a partner researcher. So she's going to be filling us all in on that, which will be a wonderful thing to discuss.
I look forward to it.
Until then, thank you very much for listening. It's goodbye from me, Paul Turner.
And it's goodbye from me, Jan Babington.